So hope. What is hope? Well, the dictionary defines it as a feeling of expectation or a desire that something will happen. I hope the sun shines this afternoon. I hope the dinner's lovely. Is that more of a wish, or is it a bit more deeply rooted in something? It also means, according to the dictionary, to cherish a desire with anticipation. Might be a holiday that's coming, or a big family event that's coming, or something like that, where you cherish it and you really look forward to it. What's interesting in the Bible, in the Old Testament particularly, is that the verses that speak about hope, we often read as wait. So all those verses that speak about waiting for the Lord or waiting on the Lord or something like that actually has in its root hope. Because hope most of the time is about waiting, isn't it? If we weren't hoping for it, it would be here already or not happening at all. So I'm going to look this morning at two pictures of hope, both found in the Old Testament, both quite a long way back in the Old Testament, and both of these stories I think you'll be very familiar with. And the first one comes from Genesis chapter 8, so it's a long way back, and I'm going to start at verse 6, and that will be on the screen. Verses 6 to 12. After 40 days, Noah opened a window he had made in the ark and sent out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the ground. But the dove could find nowhere to perch, because there was water all over the surface of the earth. So it returned to Noah in the ark. He reached out his hand and took the dove and brought it back to himself in the ark. He waited 7 more days and again sent out the dove from the ark. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Then Noah knew that the water had receded from the earth. He waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again, but this time it did not return to him. So there we have Noah doing quite a lot of waiting. Waiting for the flood waters to recede. The rain that had caused the flood. Sorry, I had COVID 2 or 3 weeks ago, and my voice goes a bit gravelly, so excuse me. The rain that had caused the flood had ended a few weeks, maybe months ago, and the water level was going down, but it wasn't going down very quickly, it would seem, because actually it seems that Noah was probably in the ark for 18 months or more, long time. Not just the 40 days and nights that it rained for. Anyway, that's a different part of the story. He'd sent out a raven, and that had kind of flown across the surface of the waters, but hadn't found anywhere to land, and so it had come back. And then a dove, he'd sent out a dove, and that hadn't found anywhere to land either. So that had come back, and Noah had taken it back into the ark. And then we read in verse 10, he waited to send out the dove a second time. And then in verse 12, we read, he waited again to send the dove out after 7 more days. So he sent the dove out, and it came back. He waited again, and he sent the dove out again. Patient Noah, waiting for the waters to recede. No, not at all. The underlying Hebrew, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but I do like to look up words. And the underlying words tell us that Noah had two very different forms of waiting in this time. In verse 10, when it says he waited 7 more days and sent the dove out from the ark, this waiting was fretful, anguished, writhing, turmoil. The word actually means twisting. This was an anguished waiting. Noah did not know how this was going to turn out. I bet you've had some of those kinds of waitings in your life, where you're waiting for something and you've no idea how things are going to turn out. You just don't know. You know, somebody's critically ill in intensive care and you just don't know if they're going to get better or not. They've got COVID maybe. Are they going to get through this? Lots and lots of people have had that anguished kind of waiting that does not have a certain kind of ending. And then in verse 12 it says, he waited another 7 days and sent out the dove, and it didn't come back to him this time. But the waiting this time is not this anguished, writhing, twisting, churning, gut-wrenching kind of waiting. This means expectantly waiting. This kind of waiting that is a bit more patient. Knowing that something's going to happen, you just don't quite know when. We might have been disappointed so far, but we know it's going to happen. So why was he anguished the first time and patient the second time? Well, the difference is that in between those 2 times, the dove had come back with the green leaf. So Noah knew that the trees were appearing. And so when he sent the dove out the second time, he was expecting that it would land in a tree and stay there. So 2 very different kinds of waiting that's all wrapped up in hope. So the situation had changed, so Noah's ability to endure the waiting was more patient. And the second story, I'm not going to read the scripture this time because it's a long story. I'm going to just summarize it because the second story is Joshua chapter 2. And I love the way that the commentators describe this. They put it very politely. It's 2 spies and a shady lady. How do you like that? 2 spies and a shady lady. The shady lady being Rahab the prostitute. But shady lady's a lot more delicate, shall we say. So I'll just tell you the story in summary. Joshua is preparing to lead the Israelites into the promised land. And he sends out 2 spies. And the shady lady happens to live in the city wall. And so as they come to the city wall, they meet. And she agrees to hide them on the roof under stalks of flax, which can't have been very comfortable, but there we are. And the king of Jericho had heard that these spies were in the land, and he had ordered Rahab to turn them over, and she tells a lie to the king, or to the soldiers that came looking. We could be diverted by the fact that she tells a lie, but we won't do that because she does appear in the kind of the heroes of the faith later on, so we won't go off at a tangent. What she tells the spies is, we know that the Lord has given you this land. We know it's going to be yours. And we are in fear of you, she says to the spies. We're worried about this because we know the Lord parted the water for you. And so we are a bit afraid of your God. We know you're coming. We're a bit afraid of your God. because actually he's done some pretty amazing things. This is an unbelieving lady who speaks in this way. And so she says, I've hidden you. I want you to do something for me. And she says, when the time comes and you invade the land, I want you to keep me and my family safe. I've protected you. Now I want you to protect me when the time comes. And the spies swear an oath that they will do that. They will let Rahab and her family live if, when they come back, they see hanging from her window, bearing in mind she lives in the city wall, which isn't like our walls, it's a great thick affair with rooms in it, you know, with, I don't know what you'd call them, but dwellings along the way around the wall. If, when we come back, we see hanging from your window a what? A red cord, a crimson rope. If we see that crimson rope, we will, and anybody that you've got in your home, we will protect you and your family. If we don't see it, then we do not need to keep our oath. You keep the rope there, we will keep our oath. The spies keep their word, and Rahab and her family are saved. And of course you know, if you know your scriptures, that she actually appears in the genealogy of Jesus. In fact, I've seen Rahab called a trophy of grace. That's a good name, isn't it, for a shady lady? A trophy of grace. And the scarlet cord was a literal sign of hope for that family. All the time that rope was there, they knew that they were going to be protected. She had to wait for that promise to be realized, but it was the sign. And one of the meanings that you can derive from the word for cord that's hanging out the window is hope. So hope, as with Noah, can be an anguished waiting, it can be a fretful waiting, or it can be an anticipating, patient waiting. And in this story, we can see that hope can be like a cord that you cling to. Two sorts of hope, well, three sorts of hope waiting there, really. And that's the kind of thing that you hang on to when you can't see the next step. Two pictures of hope, Noah and a shady lady. But I'm sure if you think about times in your own lives, there have been times when you've been waiting in an anguished way. There have been times when you've been waiting patiently. And there have been times when you've literally needed to hang on, maybe to a verse that somebody gave you, and that's been your means of getting through. So remember Noah, and remember the shady lady.